Why no contact shakes a narcissist to the core. The moment you stop responding, something invisible but violent happens. Not outside, inside them. It's not silence they feel. It's free fall. One day, you were there. Predictable, reactive, emotionally available. The next day, you're gone. No explanation. No argument. No goodbye. And in that absence, the narcissist doesn't feel lost the way most people do. They feel erased. Here's the shocking truth most people never tell you. Narcissists don't experience relationships as connection. They experience them as access. Access to your attention, your emotional energy, your reactions, your fear, your admiration. When you go, no contact, you don't just leave the relationship. You shut down the system that keeps their identity running. Imagine flipping a switch in a building that's been powered by you for years. Lights go out. Alarms start blaring. Backup generators fail. That's what no contact does. It removes the mirror they need to see themselves as important, powerful, superior, or even real. Without that reflection, their internal world begins to destabilize. Panic replaces confidence. Rage replaces charm. Desperation replaces control. This is why no contact triggers such extreme reactions. It's not because they suddenly realize they love you. It's because they've lost the ability to regulate themselves through you. Narcissists rely on external validation the way others rely on oxygen. Take it away, and they don't grieve. They scramble. They rewrite history. They chase. They threaten. They perform. Anything to restore access. For you, this moment feels confusing. You may feel guilty for disappearing. You may wonder if you're being cruel, dramatic, or unfair. But here's what matters. No. Contact isn't about punishing them. It's about saving yourself. It's the first moment where your nervous system stops being hijacked, where your thoughts begin to return, where your identity starts to reassemble. And this is why the beginning is always the hardest. Because the silence you create forces the truth into the open. Who had power? Who depended on whom? Who was feeding and who was being fed on? If this resonates with you, and you want more videos that explain narcissistic dynamics clearly, calmly, and without judgment, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this space grow and keeps these conversations going. Before we continue, here's a quick question for you. When you went no contact or thought about it, what was stronger? A. The fear of losing them. B. The fear of losing yourself. Comment A or B below. The first two reactions, charm and chaos. Once no contact is in place, the narcissist does not immediately explode. That comes later. First, they reach backward. They return to the version of themselves that once worked on you. The one that knew exactly what to say. The one who felt familiar, warm, almost safe. This is not coincidence. It is calculation. You may receive a message that sounds softer than anything you've heard in months. A memory resurfaces something only the two of you shared. There may be an apology that feels almost sincere, or a confession that sounds self-aware. The tone is different now. Calmer. Kinder. As if the problem was never that serious to begin with. As if you and them were always just one conversation away from fixing everything. This phase is not about repair, it is about access. The narcissist is testing whether the old keys still open the door. Charm, nostalgia, vulnerability, humor, whatever once pulled you back in, is brought out again, polished, and repackaged. And this is where many people stumble, not because they are weak, but because the human brain is wired to respond to familiarity. The past is seductive when it's edited, but when charm doesn't work, the tone shifts. Quietly at first. Then, unmistakably, the messages become more frequent. The presence becomes harder to ignore. You might notice them appearing in places they never cared about before. Mutual connections suddenly ask questions. Coincidences pile up until they no longer feel coincidental. This is the beginning of chaos. Chaos is what happens when control is threatened. The narcissist is no longer trying to persuade you, they are trying to overwhelm you. The goal is pressure, confusion, fatigue. If they can't pull you back with sweetness, they will exhaust you into responding. Any response will do. Anger, defensiveness, explanation, silence, broken. What's important to understand here is that this escalation isn't personal. It's procedural. Narcissists rely on external engagement to regulate their inner state. When that regulation disappears, they become frantic. Boundaries feel like abandonment. Distance feels like danger. For you, this phase can feel destabilizing. You may question whether you imagined how bad things were. You may feel tempted to explain yourself one last time, just to make it stop. But explanation is not clarity to someone who benefits from confusion. This stage tests resolve, not because you owe them anything, but because this is where the nervous system learns a new pattern, one where you don't rush to soothe what never truly soothed you back. Charm is the invitation. Chaos is the threat. Neither is connection. And recognizing that distinction is what keeps you moving forward. Social warfare, triangulation, smear campaigns, and rage. Social warfare, triangulation, smear campaigns, and rage. When charm fails, and chaos no longer forces a response, the narcissist shifts the battlefield. The conflict is no longer just between you and them. It becomes public, strategic, social. This is where the real damage is attempted, not through conversation, but through perception. You may notice subtle changes first. A friend grows distant. A coworker suddenly seems cautious around you. Conversations feel colder, guarded. You weren't there to hear what was said, but you feel the impact. This is triangulation at work. The narcissist begins pulling others into the dynamic, not to resolve anything, but to regain power by controlling the narrative. They do this because isolation weakens resistance. If they can make you feel misunderstood, judged, or alone, they increase the odds that you'll return, not because you miss them, but because you want relief. The stories they tell are rarely outright lies. They're distortions, half-truths, carefully edited versions where context disappears and intention is rewritten. You become the problem. They become the victim. And if that doesn't work, the intensity escalates. This is where rage appears, not always as screaming or obvious aggression, but as punishment, sudden hostility, cold threats wrapped in calm language, emotional volatility that feels disproportionate and frightening. Narcissistic rage is not about anger in the way most people experience it. It is about control slipping through their fingers. It is the panic response of someone whose identity depends on dominance. What makes this phase particularly painful is the temptation to defend yourself, to explain, to prove you're not who they say you are. But defense keeps you in the arena, and the arena is exactly where they want you reacting, justifying, emotionally engaged. Silence here is often misinterpreted as weakness. In reality, it is strategic withdrawal. When you stop correcting their narrative, something unexpected happens. Their behavior becomes more visible. Without you smoothing things over, without you acting as their translator or shield, others begin to notice the inconsistencies on their own. This phase can feel deeply unfair. Being misunderstood hurts. Being misrepresented cuts deeper. But social warfare relies on one thing to succeed: your participation. When you remove it, the structure begins to collapse under its own weight. Rage burns hot but brief. Smear campaigns require constant energy. And narcissists tire quickly when there is no audience left to perform for. Collapse. And the moment most people quit, but shouldn't. There comes a point where the narcissist stops advancing and starts unraveling. It doesn't look dramatic at first. There is no clear confession, no cinematic breakdown. Instead, there is confusion, inconsistency, a sudden loss of confidence that once felt immovable. This is the collapse, and it is the most dangerous moment, not because of what they do, but because of what it stirs in you. You may notice them sounding lost, exhausted, almost human. The certainty that once defined them begins to fracture. They contradict themselves. Their stories lose coherence. The intensity fades and is replaced by something quieter and more unsettling. Helplessness. For many, this is where resolve dissolves. Because collapse doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like an invitation to rescue. This is the moment most people break no contact. Not because they want to return, but because they don't want to be cruel. The narcissist may express despair, regret, or sudden insight. They may appear to finally understand the pain they caused. And for someone who has spent years absorbing blame, this vulnerability can feel like proof that everything wasn't imagined. That maybe, just maybe, things could be different now. But collapse is not transformation. It is disorientation. What you are witnessing is not accountability. It is the nervous system of someone who no longer knows how to stabilize themselves without you. When external regulation disappears, internal chaos surfaces. The pull to help, to explain, to soothe is strong because you were trained to manage their emotional state. Letting them sit with discomfort feels wrong, even unsafe. This is why this stage demands the most discipline. The power dynamic has quietly shifted. For the first time, you are not reacting to their moves. They are reacting to your absence. And that imbalance is intolerable for them. The collapse phase often comes with urgency. Messages may sound final. Language may feel heavy. The implied threat is not always explicit, but it hangs in the air. If you don't respond, something terrible might happen. This pressure is psychological, not prophetic. The truth is, growth does not emerge from collapse unless someone chooses responsibility, and narcissists rarely do without sustained consequences. What looks like a breakthrough is often just another attempt to restore equilibrium. Holding your boundary here is not abandonment, it is clarity. Storms are loudest just before they break, and stepping back now allows the system to complete its cycle without pulling you back into it. The final move. They walk away, and you come back to life. At some point, the noise fades. Not because anything was resolved, not because there was closure or understanding, but because the narcissist finally realizes something fundamental has changed. You are no longer available in the way that once sustained them. The reactions have stopped. The fear is gone. The emotional leverage no longer works. And without that supply, they begin to detach. This is the final move, not an apology, not growth, not insight, a quiet redirection. Narcissists do not heal in the absence of supply, they relocate it. When they understand that you are no longer a viable source of attention, validation, or emotional regulation, they turn elsewhere. Another person, another role, another audience. It can feel abrupt, almost surreal, especially after the intensity that preceded it. One day, they were relentless. The next, distant, as if a switch flipped. For many people, this moment doesn't feel victorious. It feels empty. There is often a strange grief here, not for the relationship as it was, but for the version of yourself that endured it. You may feel disoriented without the constant pressure, the adrenaline, the vigilance. Silence, after chaos, can feel unnerving. But slowly, something else begins to emerge beneath it. Space. Space to think without interruption. To feel without being corrected. To exist without being managed or monitored. This is where life starts to return. Not dramatically, but quietly. Your nervous system recalibrates. Your body softens. You stop scanning for their reactions. Their name no longer hijacks your attention. The world feels wider. No, contact doesn't succeed when they disappear. It succeeds when you reappear. This is the stage where identity rebuilds. Not by confronting the past endlessly, but by reorienting toward the future. Many people discover interests they abandoned, relationships they neglected, instincts they learned to distrust. Reclaiming these parts is not about proving anything to anyone. It's about remembering who you were before everything revolved around managing someone else's emotions. The narcissist walking away is not the ending you imagined, but it is the ending that frees you. Because what leaves your life is not love, it is a pattern. And what returns is agency, clarity, choice. You didn't lose them. You stopped losing yourself. And from that point on, whatever comes next is finally yours. The journey you've just followed is the story of someone who slowly reclaimed themselves after being entangled in a relationship that thrived on control rather than connection. At the beginning, the narcissist's presence felt powerful, consuming, and impossible to escape. Every reaction, every emotion, every attempt to explain or fix things kept the cycle alive. But the moment no contact began, the truth emerged not all at once, but step by step. The narcissist moved through predictable phases. Charm meant to reopen the door. Chaos meant to break resistance. Social manipulation meant to isolate. Rage meant to intimidate. And collapse meant to pull at compassion. None of these stages were about love or growth. They were about restoring access. And when that access was no longer available, the narcissist did what they always do. They walked away to find supply elsewhere. What changed the outcome was not their behavior, but the decision to stop participating in it. The deepest lesson from this story is that boundaries reveal reality. You don't need closure from someone who benefited from confusion. You don't need validation from someone who erased your needs. When you stop reacting, explaining, and rescuing, the dynamic loses its power. In everyday life, this lesson applies far beyond narcissistic relationships. It teaches us to pay attention to how we feel in someone's presence, to value emotional safety over intensity, and to recognize when empathy turns into self-betrayal. Applying this wisdom means practicing self-trust. It means pausing instead of reacting, choosing distance over drama, and remembering that walking away can be an act of strength, not failure. Healing begins when you stop trying to be understood by those who never truly listened and start listening to yourself instead. Disclaimer: this video is for educational and informational purposes only and does not replace professional diagnosis or therapy from a licensed mental health professional. Before we wrap up, here's a quick question for you. What feels more important to you right now? A. Protecting your peace. B. Understanding what really happened. Comment A or B below. What's your perspective on this story? Share your thoughts or experiences in the comments so others can learn from them too. And if this content resonates with you, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep creating meaningful, insightful content in the future.